The Real History of Coca-Cola. Chapter 1. The Birth of a Formula, 1886 to 1887. Our story begins on a warm spring day in Atlanta, Georgia, in the year 1886. The city was still recovering from the devastation of the Civil War, barely 2 decades in the past. In a modest backyard at 107 Marietta Street, a pharmacist named John Stith Pemberton was stirring a brass kettle over an open fire. He had no idea that the concoction bubbling before him would become one of the most recognized products in human history. John Pemberton was 55 years old, a Confederate veteran who had been wounded in the chest during the Battle of Columbus in 1865. Like many soldiers of his time, he had become dependent on morphine to manage his chronic pain. In his struggle with addiction, Pemberton had devoted himself to finding alternatives to morphine, experimenting with various medicinal compounds in his home laboratory. He was particularly interested in the coca plant from South America and the cola nut from Africa, both of which were believed to have therapeutic value properties without the dangers of opium-based medicines. On that fateful day in May, Pemberton combined extracts from coca leaves, cola nuts, sugar, and other ingredients into a thick, dark syrup. He believed this mixture could serve as a remedy for various ailments, including headaches, nervousness, and what was then called neurasthenia, a condition of nervous exhaustion that seemed epidemic in the rapidly modernizing America of the late 19th century. The original formula contained a small amount of cocaine from the coca leaves, which was not unusual for patent medicines of that era. Cocaine was legal and widely used in various tonics and remedies, as the dangers of the substance were not yet understood by the medical community. Pemberton took a jug of his new syrup to Jacob's Pharmacy, just a few blocks away on Peachtree Street. The pharmacy's soda fountain was a popular gathering place in Atlanta, where locals would come to socialize, discuss the news of the day, and enjoy carbonated beverages. Willis Venable, who worked at the fountain, mixed the syrup with plain water and offered it to customers. The response was lukewarm at best. The taste was interesting, but not particularly special, certainly nothing that would cause customers to come back, asking for more. But then, either by accident or by inspiration, someone decided to mix the syrup with carbonated water instead of plain water. Some accounts say it was Venable himself who made this change. Others suggest it was a customer's request. Regardless of who first had the idea, the result was transformative. The carbonation brought out the flavors in a way that plain water never could, creating a refreshing, effervescent drink that was unlike anything else available at Atlanta's soda fountains at the time. Pemberton's bookkeeper, Frank Mason Robinson, proved to have a talent for marketing that rivaled Pemberton's pharmaceutical skills. Robinson suggested the name Coca-Cola, believing that the 2 C's would look striking in advertisements and would be easy for customers to remember. He personally wrote out the name in flowing Spencerian script, the ornate, elegant handwriting style popular in business correspondence of the day. That script, with its elegant curves and confident flourishes, would become one of the most valuable trademarks in the world, virtually unchanged from Robinson's original design to this day. Robinson also penned the first advertisement for Coca-Cola, describing it as delicious and refreshing. 2 simple words that would remain associated with the brand for over a century. During that first year of 1886, Pemberton sold approximately 9 glasses of Coca-Cola per day at Jacob's Pharmacy. The price was 5 cents a glass, which was standard for soda fountain drinks of the period. Total sales for 1886 amounted to about $50, while Pemberton had spent approximately $70 on advertising and production costs. By any financial measure, the first year was a failure. But Pemberton remained optimistic about his creation, convinced that with proper marketing and distribution, Coca-Cola could become something significant. Pemberton's health, however, was declining rapidly. His morphine addiction continued to plague him, and stomach cancer was slowly taking his life. Desperate for cash, he began selling portions of his business to various partners, creating a complex web of ownership that would lead to legal disputes for years to come. Among those who purchased shares in Coca-Cola was a man named Asa Griggs Candler, a successful Atlanta pharmacist and businessman. Candler had first tried Coca-Cola when seeking relief from a severe headache, and he was immediately impressed. He recognized something that Pemberton could not fully appreciate. The commercial potential of this beverage extended far beyond the medicinal market. As 1886 drew to a close, Coca-Cola was little more than a local curiosity. But in those first tentative months, the essential elements were already in place. The formula captured a unique combination of flavors that appealed to the American palate. The name and logo created a distinctive brand identity, and the association with soda fountains gave Coca-Cola a context where it could thrive. The stage was set for what would come next, though no one could have imagined the scale of what was about to unfold. Chapter 2: The Candler Era, 1888 to 1919. Asa Griggs Candler was a man possessed by two powerful forces, ambition and faith. Born on a farm in Villarica, Georgia, in 1851, he had worked his way up from rural poverty to become one of Atlanta's most successful businessmen. He was a devout Methodist who neither drank alcohol nor smoked tobacco, qualities that made him an unlikely figure to build an empire on a recreational beverage. But Candler saw in Coca-Cola not a frivolous indulgence, but a healthful tonic that could improve people's lives while making him wealthy. Between 1888 and 1891, Candler systematically purchased the various shares of Coca-Cola from Pemberton's heirs and partners. The process was complicated by the confusion Pemberton had created in his desperate final years. There were competing claims and threats of lawsuits, but Candler was patient and methodical. He negotiated, he paid, and sometimes he simply waited for claimants to give up. By 1891, he had consolidated control of Coca-Cola, having spent a total of approximately $2,300. It would prove to be one of the most profitable investments in American business history. Candler's first priority was to improve and standardize the formula. While he kept the basic combination of coca extract, cola nut, sugar, and other flavoring ingredients, he worked with a chemist to refine the taste and ensure consistency. He also began removing cocaine from the formula, responding to growing concerns. By 1903, Coca-Cola was made with spent coca leaves, from which the cocaine had been extracted, though trace amounts remained for years afterward. But Candler's true genius lay in marketing. He understood that people would pay for something if they believed it was special. And to make something special, you had to make it famous. In 1892, Candler founded the Coca-Cola Company as a Georgia corporation. He invested heavily in advertising, spending more on promotion than any comparable business of the time. He distributed thousands of coupons for free glasses of Coca-Cola. He produced calendars, serving trays, clocks, and countless other items bearing the Coca-Cola logo. The company's sales grew at a remarkable pace. In 1892, the company sold approximately 35,000 gallons of syrup. By 1895, that number had grown to 76,000 gallons. By 1900, it was 370,000 gallons. Coca-Cola was spreading beyond Atlanta, beyond Georgia, across the South and into the North and West. This expansion was facilitated by Candler's decision to franchise production through independent bottlers. Rather than bottling and distributing himself, Candler sold territorial rights to businessmen who would receive syrup concentrate and bottle it in their regions. This allowed rapid expansion without massive capital investment. The bottlers took on the risk and expense while Coca-Cola collected revenue from syrup sales. The turn of the century brought new challenges. As Coca-Cola became more successful, it attracted imitators. Dozens of cola drinks appeared: Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, and countless others. Candler responded aggressively, filing lawsuits and establishing legal protection for the trademark. The company's legal battles helped establish important precedents in trademark law. In 1903, the company faced scrutiny over cocaine content. Though most had been removed, the name suggested coca extract. Sensationalist newspapers ran exposés about cocaine in soft drinks. Candler weathered this storm through transparency and reformulation, emphasizing that Coca-Cola contained no measurable cocaine. The marketing shifted from medicinal claims toward pure refreshment. During this period, the distinctive contour bottle was developed. In 1915, the company challenged manufacturers to create a bottle recognizable even in the dark. The Root Glass Company, one with a design inspired by the cocoa pod. It was patented in 1915 and became an American icon. By 1919, Coca-Cola had become a national phenomenon. The company was selling more than 3 million gallons of syrup annually. The script logo appeared on buildings across America. Candler was growing old, and in 1919, the family sold the company to investors led by Ernest Woodruff for $25 million. The Candler era had established Coca-Cola as a major American brand, setting the stage for global expansion. Chapter 3. The Woodruff years begin, 1919 to 1929. In 1919, the Candler family's decision to sell shocked Atlanta. The buyer was banker Ernest Woodruff, who paid $25 million, one of the largest transactions in Southern history. Ernest was a financier who saw Coca-Cola as an investment opportunity. His son, Robert Winship Woodruff, became president in 1923 at age 30. Robert Woodruff would lead the company for 6 decades, transforming it into a global empire. Robert Woodruff, known as the Boss, was different from Candler. He was strategic, hiring talented people and holding them accountable. He was intensely private, but fiercely competitive, committed to making Coca-Cola dominant worldwide. When he took control, the company faced challenges. The post-war economy was unstable. Prohibition had closed bars and saloons. Competition from Pepsi was intensifying. Woodruff focused on 3 areas: quality, distribution, and marketing. He invested in quality control, establishing laboratories to test products. He insisted on consistency everywhere. For distribution, he looked beyond soda fountains, pushing for coolers in gas stations and stores. He coined, within an arm's reach of desire, his vision of universal availability. He invested in refrigeration technology. But marketing was where Woodruff revolutionized the company. He understood Coca-Cola sold more than beverages. It sold experiences, feelings, moments of pleasure. His advertising portrayed it as part of the good life, associated with happiness and American optimism. In 1929, as the stock market crashed and depression began, Woodruff made a crucial decision. He committed to massive advertising spending while competitors cut budgets. He believed maintaining visibility during hard times would pay dividends during recovery. He was right. As competitors reduced presence, Coca-Cola became more dominant. The advertising of this era was revolutionary. The company worked with leading artists. Norman Rockwell painted advertisements capturing small-town American life. 1931. A jolly red-suited figure enjoying a Coke. This would become the standard Santa depiction, demonstrating Coca-Cola's cultural influence. The company pioneered radio advertising. As radio dominated American homes, Coca-Cola sponsored popular programs. The jingle, "The Pause That Refreshes," became embedded in American consciousness, capturing what Coca-Cola offered, a moment of pleasure in a busy day. During this period, Coca-Cola worked to establish itself as an all-American product, tied to national identity. This was deliberate strategy, positioning Coca-Cola as more than a company, but as an institution, as fundamentally American as baseball or apple pie. The advertising portrayed Coca-Cola drinkers as wholesome, happy Americans. The message was clear. Drinking Coca-Cola wasn't just refreshing, it was patriotic. The 1920s saw the beginning of international expansion, though limited. The company opened plants in Canada, Mexico, and other countries. These operations were small but established precedent for later expansion. Woodruff understood the potential for growth outside America was enormous. The relationship with independent bottlers evolved. The bottlers had become wealthy through Coca-Cola, but guarded their independence. Woodruff had to balance consistency needs with the reality that he couldn't dictate terms. He negotiated, cajoled, and occasionally threatened, working to align bottlers' interests with company strategy. One persistent challenge was pricing. The 5-cent Coke had become an American institution, but inflation made that price difficult to maintain profitably. Woodruff resisted raising prices, believing the psychological importance of the 5-cent Coke was more valuable than additional revenue. This decision would have consequences, as the company struggled to maintain profitability at that iconic price point. By the end of the 20s, Coca-Cola had established itself as a leading brand. It was available in hundreds of thousands of locations. Its advertising was ubiquitous. The distinctive bottle and logo were among America's most recognized symbols. Under Woodruff's leadership, the company was positioned for greater growth, though the trials of the coming decade would test it severely. The foundations were in place to become a global phenomenon. But first, it would have to survive the worst economic crisis in American history and a world war. Chapter 4. Depression and World War, 1930 to 1945. The Great Depression hit America in October 1929. Banks failed, businesses collapsed, unemployment soared. By 1933, 1 in 4 workers was unemployed. Many predicted Coca-Cola, a 5-cent indulgence, would be an early casualty. They were wrong. Sales did decline, but far less than expected. In some ways, the Depression helped solidify Coca-Cola's place in American culture. At a nickel, a Coke was one of the few small pleasures struggling families could afford. A moment of normalcy that could be purchased for pocket change. Woodruff understood this. His advertising portrayed Coca-Cola not as luxury, but as deserved reward, a brief respite from hard times. The company's decision to maintain heavy advertising during the Depression was vindicated. While competitors cut back, Coca-Cola remained visible, present, constant. The red disc with white script became a symbol of American resilience. As the worst eased in the mid-30s, Coca-Cola was positioned to benefit from recovery. The 30s saw important developments in distribution and packaging. The 6-bottle carton, introduced in 1932, allowed home consumption. Previously, Coca-Cola had been primarily a fountain drink or single bottles. The 6-pack made it convenient to stock at home, transforming it from occasional treat to household staple. Vending machines became increasingly important. These machines allowed Coca-Cola availability where staffed counters were impractical. The company improved machine reliability, and by decade's end, Coca-Cola vending machines were common in factories, offices, and public spaces. The company continued protecting its formula. The exact recipe remained closely guarded, known only to a handful of executives. This secrecy wasn't just about preventing imitation. It was marketing. The mysterious formula added to Coca-Cola's allure. Stories circulated about the formula in a locked vault, known only to 2 people forbidden from traveling together. Whether true or partly mythology, these stories served their purpose, adding to the mystique. As the 30s progressed and war clouds gathered, Coca-Cola faced a new challenge, preparing for seemingly inevitable conflict. Woodruff was determined that Coca-Cola would not only survive, but emerge stronger. He began positioning the company to serve military personnel, anticipating millions of Americans in uniform, stationed far from home. When America entered World War II in December 1941, Woodruff made a defining commitment. Coca-Cola would be available to every serviceman, wherever stationed, for 5 cents, regardless of delivery cost. This was more than marketing. It was support for the war effort and recognition that Coca-Cola had become a symbol of home for Americans overseas. Making good on this commitment required extraordinary effort. The company worked with the military to establish bottling plants near bases and battle zones. These portable plants, some barely more than tents and equipment, produced Coca-Cola under difficult to impossible conditions. They operated in North African deserts, South Pacific jungles, European muddy fields. Technical observers, as Coca-Cola employees were called for official status, traveled with troops, setting up operations wherever American forces went. The impact on both company and war effort is difficult to overstate. For soldiers far from home, facing danger and hardship, a cold Coca-Cola was a powerful reminder of what they fought for. It was a taste of America, a moment of normalcy in chaos. Military leaders recognized this, supporting Coca-Cola's efforts, understanding that morale was as important as ammunition. One general famously sent a telegram requesting immediate shipment of materials for Coca-Cola bottling plants, calling it essential to the war effort. Advertisements featured soldiers in combat zones enjoying a Coke, with captions like, "How about a Coke, soldier?" These ads reinforced the association between Coca-Cola and American identity. The war years saw Coca-Cola expand its international presence dramatically. The company established operations in Europe, Africa, Asia, and Pacific islands, reaching places that would have taken decades through normal expansion. By war's end, Coca-Cola had bottling plants in 44 countries. Many operations would continue after the war, providing the foundation for post-war global expansion. Domestically, the war brought challenges. Sugar and ingredients were rationed, limiting production. The company had to allocate supplies between military and civilian markets, sometimes frustrating civilian consumers who found Coca-Cola unavailable. But the commitment to serving the military earned public support. The war also introduced millions worldwide to Coca-Cola for the first time. Allied soldiers, resistance fighters, and liberated populations encountered Coca-Cola as part of the American presence. For many, it was their first taste of American consumer culture, making a lasting impression. Stories circulated about Soviet soldiers trying Coca-Cola, French civilians celebrating liberation with GIs and Coke, Japanese citizens encountering the drink during occupation. When the war ended in 1945, Coca-Cola was exhausted but triumphant. The company had invested heavily in supporting the war effort, spending millions on war-zone bottling plants. But in return, it had become inextricably linked with American victory, American power, and American culture. Coca-Cola had entered the war as a successful American company. It emerged as an international symbol of America itself. The post-war world would present new opportunities and challenges, but the foundation laid during war years would enable building a truly global enterprise. Chapter 5. The Golden Age of Advertising, 1946 to 1959. The 15 years following World War II were unprecedented prosperity and optimism in America. Soldiers returned home, started families, bought houses, and embraced consumer culture with enthusiasm born of depression, scarcity, and wartime sacrifice. Americans were ready to enjoy themselves, and companies like Coca-Cola were ready to help. Woodruff understood the post-war period required a different marketing approach. During war, Coca-Cola had positioned itself as patriotic, essential, connected to military effort. Now it needed repositioning for peace, prosperity, and emerging suburban lifestyle. The challenge was maintaining the emotional connection built with Americans while adapting the message. The company's response was creating advertising that was cheerful, optimistic, and relentlessly positive. Coca-Cola ads of the late 40s and 50s portrayed an idealized America, where people were happy, families close, communities harmonious, and everyone enjoyed ice-cold Coca-Cola. This wasn't the America that actually existed, with racial segregation, gender inequalities, and Cold War anxieties. But it was the America many wanted to believe in, and Coca-Cola's advertising helped create and sustain that vision. Television, which emerged as the dominant entertainment medium in the 50s, gave Coca-Cola a powerful platform. The company was an early enthusiastic adopter, sponsoring popular programs and creating commercials that became cultural touchstones. The visual medium allowed sophisticated storytelling. Its commercials weren't just product pitches, they were mini-narratives about American life, with Coca-Cola playing a supporting but essential role. One successful campaign was "The Pause That Refreshes." This slogan, introduced in the 20s, took on new resonance in the busy post-war world. Americans were working hard, building careers, raising families, pursuing the American dream. The idea of pausing, of taking a moment to refresh and recharge, appealed to people feeling increasingly busy and stressed. Coca-Cola positioned itself as the perfect accompaniment to that pause, the reward that made the break worthwhile. The company invested heavily in outdoor advertising, billboards, painted building sides, neon signs, and other forms kept the Coca-Cola logo constantly visible in American cities and along highways. As Americans became increasingly mobile, driving more and traveling farther, outdoor advertising ensured the brand remained present wherever they went. The goal was making it impossible to go through a day without encountering the logo multiple times. During this period, Coca-Cola worked to associate itself with American popular culture. The company sponsored sporting events, music concerts, and entertainment. It advertised in movie theaters, getting the logo before audiences. It distributed promotional items, from playing cards to bottle openers to calendars, putting the logo in American homes. The strategy was saturation. Make Coca-Cola so omnipresent that it became part of the mental furniture of American life. The 50s saw Coca-Cola confront rising competitors and market segments. Pepsi-Cola had recovered from Depression bankruptcy and was mounting an increasingly effective challenge. Pepsi's strategy was offering more product for the same price, appealing to budget-conscious consumers with twice as much for a nickel. Royal Crown Cola and regional brands competed for shelf space and consumer attention. More significantly, new soft drink types were emerging. Root beers, lemon-lime sodas, and flavored drinks were gaining popularity. The soft drink market was becoming more segmented, with different products appealing to different tastes and occasions. Coca-Cola faced a strategic question. Should it remain focused on its core cola product or expand into other flavors? For most of the 50s, the company chose to focus on Coca-Cola itself, believing brand strength was more important than product variety. The strategy was making Coca-Cola so dominant, so universally available and advertised, that it would maintain market leadership despite competition. This had worked well in the past, but there were signs of change. In 1955, Coca-Cola introduced the family-size bottle, containing 26 ounces compared to the standard 6.5-ounce bottle. This responded to consumer demand for larger portions, particularly for home consumption. The traditional small bottle was perfect for individual consumption at fountains or on the go, but families wanted something larger for dinner or gatherings. The company also experimented with different packaging formats. Cans, used during World War II for military distribution, were introduced to the civilian market in the mid-50s. Cans offered advantages in storage and transportation, appealing to consumers who valued convenience. They also opened new distribution channels, particularly vending machines designed specifically for cans. Internationally, Coca-Cola continued the expansion begun during World War II. The company opened new bottling plants across Europe, helping rebuild war-torn economies while creating new markets. In Asia, Latin America, and Africa, the company established operations, adapting marketing to local cultures while maintaining core brand identity. The goal was making Coca-Cola a global brand, recognized and available everywhere. This international expansion wasn't without controversy. In some countries, Coca-Cola faced resistance from local beverage companies and critics who saw it as a symbol of American cultural imperialism. The company's ubiquity, aggressive marketing, and association with American power made it a target for anti-American sentiment. In France, communist-aligned activists vandalized Coca-Cola trucks and called for boycotts. In the Middle East, the company faced boycotts related to American support for Israel. But these challenges didn't stop expansion. If anything, they reinforced Coca-Cola's status as a symbol of American culture and values. For supporters of America and American capitalism, drinking Coca-Cola was a way of expressing that support. For critics, boycotting Coca-Cola was protesting American influence. Either way, Coca-Cola remained relevant, talked about, important. By the end of the 50s, Coca-Cola had achieved something remarkable. It had become not just a product, but a cultural phenomenon. The distinctive bottle shape was recognized worldwide. The script logo was one of the most valuable trademarks in existence. The drink itself was available in more countries, and consumed by more people than perhaps any other manufactured product. Coca-Cola wasn't just selling beverages, it was selling an idea, an image, a taste of the American lifestyle. But challenges lay ahead. The 60s would bring social upheaval, changing consumer preferences, and intensifying competition. The certainties of the 50s would give way to the questions and conflicts of the 60s. Coca-Cola would have to adapt once again, finding new ways to remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. Chapter 6. The Pepsi Challenge, 1960 to 1975. The 1960s arrived with both promise and turbulence. America was changing rapidly, and Coca-Cola navigated waters more complex than anything faced before. The comfortable certainties of the 50s, when Coca-Cola's dominance seemed unshakable, were giving way to a more competitive, more fragmented, more challenging marketplace. The most serious threat came from Pepsi-Cola, no longer content to be a distant second. Under CEO Donald Kendall, Pepsi launched an aggressive campaign to challenge Coca-Cola's supremacy. The strategy was multifaceted but centered on two key elements: positioning Pepsi as the choice of a younger generation and attacking Coca-Cola's taste advantage through blind taste tests. The Pepsi Generation campaign, launched in 1963, was revolutionary in soft drink marketing. Instead of focusing on product attributes like taste or refreshment, Pepsi associated itself with youth, energy, and modernity. The message was clear. Coca-Cola was your parents' drink. Pepsi was yours. The campaign featured young, attractive people enjoying life, with Pepsi as part of their vibrant, modern lifestyle. It was aspirational marketing at its finest, resonating with young consumers increasingly defining themselves in opposition to the older generation. Coca-Cola initially struggled to respond effectively. The company's traditional marketing emphasized universality. Coca-Cola was for everyone, all ages, all occasions. But this message seemed old-fashioned compared to Pepsi's youth-focused approach. Coca-Cola's advertising still portrayed wholesome families and traditional American values, while Pepsi showed young people breaking free from convention. In a decade increasingly defined by youth rebellion and cultural change, Pepsi's message was more culturally aligned. The Pepsi Challenge, introduced in 1975, took the attack to a new level. In shopping malls and stores across America, Pepsi conducted blind taste tests, asking consumers to try 2 unlabeled colas and choose which they preferred. The results, according to Pepsi, showed that more people preferred Pepsi's sweeter taste. This was direct comparison advertising, challenging Coca-Cola's fundamental claim to superiority on the very basis that mattered most: taste. Coca-Cola's response was complicated by internal debates about strategy. Some executives wanted to respond aggressively, attacking Pepsi directly. Others argued that engaging would only elevate the competitor and undermine Coca-Cola's image as the leader. Robert Woodruff, though semi-retired, still influenced major decisions, and his instinct was avoiding any marketing that acknowledged Pepsi as a legitimate rival. The company's solution was launching the It's the Real Thing campaign in 1969. This slogan cleverly positioned Coca-Cola as the authentic, original cola, implying that all competitors were merely imitations. The campaign featured the song, "I'd Like to Buy the World a Coke," which became one of the most famous advertising jingles in history. The song's message of global harmony and understanding resonated in an era of war and social division, helping reposition Coca-Cola as not just a beverage but a force for good in the world. But advertising alone couldn't solve all problems. The company faced operational and strategic challenges requiring more fundamental changes. One major issue was the pricing structure. The 5-cent Coke, an institution since the early 20th century, was no longer economically sustainable. Inflation and rising costs meant bottlers couldn't make profits at that price point. But raising prices risked alienating consumers and creating openings for competitors. The solution was gradual transition to higher prices, accompanied by new package sizes. If a 6.5-ounce bottle could no longer be sold profitably for 5 cents, perhaps a 12-ounce bottle could be sold for 10 or 15 cents, giving consumers more product and bottlers more revenue. This transition wasn't smooth, marking the end of an era. The 5-cent Coke had been a constant in American life for decades, and its disappearance symbolized the end of post-war prosperity and the beginning of a more uncertain economic period. The company also confronted changing dietary concerns. In the 60s, Americans became increasingly conscious of sugar consumption and calories. Health advocates warned about dangers of too much sugar, and consumers began looking for lower-calorie alternatives. This trend posed a significant challenge for Coca-Cola, which was essentially sweetened, flavored water. The company's response was introducing diet versions of its products. Tab, a low-calorie cola sweetened with saccharin, was launched in 1963. Tab was marketed primarily to women, with advertising that emphasized weight control and slimness. The campaign was successful in creating a dedicated consumer base, though Tab never achieved the mainstream acceptance that Coca-Cola enjoyed. International expansion that had begun during World War II accelerated during the 60s and 70s. Coca-Cola opened operations in new countries, adapting products and marketing to local tastes and cultures. In some markets, the company introduced products specifically designed for local preferences. In Japan, for example, Coca-Cola introduced a variety of canned coffee products. In India, the company worked to create products using local ingredients and flavors. This international expansion brought Coca-Cola into contact with diverse political and economic systems. In some countries, particularly those with socialist or communist governments, Coca-Cola was welcomed as a source of jobs and technology. In others, it was viewed suspiciously as a tool of American imperialism. The company had to navigate these political complexities while maintaining its brand identity and business objectives. The 70s brought new challenges related to environmental concerns. Glass bottles, which had been the primary package since the beginning, were coming under criticism as wasteful and environmentally damaging. The company's response was introducing recyclable bottles and participating in bottle return programs. But the trend toward disposable containers was clear, and Coca-Cola had to balance environmental concerns with consumer convenience and economic efficiency. During this period, Coca-Cola also began diversifying beyond soft drinks. The company acquired Minute Maid, a leading producer of orange juice, in 1960. This acquisition gave Coca-Cola a presence in the non-carbonated beverage market and access to new distribution channels. The company also experimented with other beverages and even some food products, though these experiments were generally less successful than the core soft drink business. The bottler network, which had been crucial to Coca-Cola's expansion, was becoming increasingly problematic. Many bottlers were still family-owned businesses, run by descendants of the original franchisees from the early 20th century. Some operations were efficient and innovative. Others were outdated and poorly managed. The company had limited ability to force changes on independent bottlers, creating inconsistencies in quality, distribution, and marketing. Coca-Cola began a gradual process of consolidating the bottler network, encouraging mergers and acquisitions that would create larger, more professional bottling operations. This process would continue for decades, gradually giving the company more control over distribution while maintaining the franchising system that had enabled its original expansion. By the mid-70s, Coca-Cola was at a crossroads. It remained the world's leading soft drink company, with unparalleled brand recognition and distribution. But its dominance was under serious challenge. Pepsi was gaining market share, particularly among young consumers. Other competitors were finding success in niche markets and changing consumer preferences from diet concerns to flavor variety were creating a more fragmented market where simple dominance of one product was increasingly difficult. The company needed to evolve, to adapt to new realities, while maintaining the core strength of the Coca-Cola brand. The next decade would test the company's ability to manage this evolution, leading to both triumphs and one of the most spectacular miscalculations in business history. Chapter 7. New Coke Debacle, 1985. April 23, 1985, began as a day of celebration at the Coca-Cola Company. At a press conference in New York City, Chairman and CEO Roberto Goizueta announced what he called the boldest single marketing move in the history of the packaged goods business. After 99 years, Coca-Cola was changing its formula. The new formula, the company proclaimed, was smoother, sweeter, and in blind taste tests, preferred by a majority of consumers. New Coke was born, and the company was confident it would revitalize the brand and defeat Pepsi once and for all. The immediate response seemed positive. Media coverage was extensive, giving Coca-Cola publicity that would have cost millions. The press conference was carried live on national television. The new formula was featured on magazine covers and in newspapers across the country. Curious consumers rushed to try new Coke, driving initial sales higher than expected. For a brief moment, it seemed the gamble might pay off. But within days, the backlash began. The company's hotline, which normally received about 400 calls a day, was overwhelmed with thousands of calls from angry consumers. The overwhelming majority were furious. They felt betrayed, robbed of something precious, insulted by the implication that their preferred drink needed improvement. Many callers were emotional, some crying, some angry, some pleading with the company to bring back the original formula. Letters poured into the Atlanta headquarters, hundreds and then thousands of them. Some were polite, but firm expressions of disappointment. Others were angry denunciations. Some were creative, including mock obituaries for old Coca-Cola, and declarations that the writer was switching to Pepsi. A few even contained packages of new Coke that had been poured down drains, returned as a symbolic rejection. What the company had failed to fully appreciate was that Coca-Cola wasn't just a product. It was part of the American cultural fabric. People had drunk Coca-Cola at important moments in their lives. It had been present at first dates, family celebrations, moments of comfort and joy. Changing the formula felt like changing a piece of America itself. The angry reaction wasn't just about taste preferences. It was about identity, memory, and emotional attachment. Organized resistance emerged quickly. A group calling itself Old Cola Drinkers of America was formed, with the stated goal of forcing the company to return the original formula to the market. The group claimed to have recruited over 100,000 members and threatened legal action. While the legal threats went nowhere, it attracted media attention and kept the controversy in the public eye. Some bottlers, independent franchisees with their own regional power bases began to rebel. They had invested decades building their businesses around Coca-Cola and were deeply unhappy about having their flagship product changed without their input. A few bottlers began publicly criticizing the decision, adding to the pressure on the company to reconsider. Pepsi naturally capitalized on Coca-Cola's troubles. The company declared victory, proclaiming that Coca-Cola had essentially admitted defeat in the cola wars by changing its formula to be more like Pepsi. Pepsi ads mockingly celebrated the change, suggesting that Coca-Cola had finally recognized Pepsi's superior taste. For Pepsi, New Coke was a public relations gift that validated everything they had been saying for years. As weeks passed and the backlash didn't diminish, the company's executives faced a harsh reality. They had made a terrible mistake. All the market research, all the taste tests, all the careful planning had missed something fundamental. They had measured taste preferences, but failed to measure emotional attachment. They had asked consumers which cola tasted better, but not how they would feel about losing the original Coca-Cola. Inside the company, a fierce debate erupted about what to do. Some executives argued for staying the course, insisting that consumers would adjust once they got used to it. They pointed to the taste test data, which still showed consumers preferred the new formula in blind tests. Others argued that the damage to the brand was too severe, that the company needed to admit the mistake and return the original formula to the market. Roberto Goizueta found himself in an impossible position. He had staked his reputation on New Coke, and admitting failure would be personally humiliating. But he was also a pragmatist who understood that protecting his ego was less important than protecting the Coca-Cola brand. After extensive discussions with his management team and with bottlers, Goizueta made a decision that required considerable courage. New Coke would remain on the market, but the original formula would return under the name Coca-Cola Classic. On July 11, 1985, less than 3 months after New Coke's introduction, the company announced the return of the original formula. The press conference was more subdued than the April announcement, and Goizueta was careful to frame the decision not as a reversal, but as a response to consumer passion. The company, he suggested, had been touched by the depth of consumer loyalty to the original formula and was bringing it back to honor that loyalty. The public response to Coca-Cola Classic's return was overwhelmingly positive. The same phone lines that had been jammed with angry calls now received calls of celebration and relief. Newspapers ran stories about the return of an American icon. Bars and restaurants that had stocked up on old Coca-Cola during the New Coke period held celebrations. For a while, both New Coke and Coca-Cola Classic remained on the market, giving consumers a choice. But the choice was really no choice at all. Coca-Cola Classic outsold New Coke by enormous margins from the start. New Coke lingered for a few years, gradually being phased out and eventually disappearing entirely, except for a few niche markets. But here's the remarkable thing. The new Coke Debacle, which seemed like a catastrophic failure at the time, ultimately benefited the Coca-Cola Company. The controversy had reminded consumers how much they cared about Coca-Cola. The return of the original formula was celebrated as a victory for consumer power, and the extensive media coverage had kept Coca-Cola in the public conversation for months, generating publicity that would have cost hundreds of millions to purchase. The New Coke episode taught the Coca-Cola Company and American business more broadly important lessons about brand management, consumer loyalty, and the limits of market research. It demonstrated that some brands transcend their functional attributes, that they carry emotional and cultural meanings that can't be easily captured in taste tests or focus groups. In the years that followed, Coca-Cola Classic reclaimed and even expanded its market dominance. The scare of potentially losing Coca-Cola had reinforced its value in consumers' minds. Chapter 8. Global Expansion, 1986 to 1999. The late 1980s and 90s marked a period of aggressive global expansion for the Coca-Cola Company. Having survived the new Coke crisis and re-established its domestic dominance, the company turned its attention to becoming a truly global enterprise, bringing Coca-Cola to every corner of the planet. Roberto Goizueta, vindicated by the company's recovery from the new Coke debacle, pursued an ambitious strategy summarized in a simple statement. We've got to think of Coca-Cola not as an American company with a presence abroad, but as a global company with a strong presence in America. This wasn't just rhetoric. It represented a fundamental shift in how the company viewed itself and its market. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 opened vast new markets to Coca-Cola. For decades, the communist bloc had been largely closed to American consumer products. Now, suddenly, hundreds of millions of people in Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia were potential Coca-Cola customers. The company moved aggressively to establish operations in these markets, often in partnership with local entrepreneurs who understood the terrain. The scenes of Coca-Cola entering these markets were striking. In Moscow, the opening of the first McDonald's restaurant with Coca-Cola products available created lines that stretched for blocks, with people waiting hours for a taste of American consumer culture. In Poland, the Czech Republic, and other former Soviet satellites, Coca-Cola trucks were greeted almost as symbols of freedom and capitalism. The company's distinctive logo appeared on buildings and billboards across the region, a visual representation of the transition from communism to market economy. China presented a different challenge. The company had briefly operated in China before the Communist Revolution, but had been expelled in 1949. After China began opening to foreign investment in the 70s, Coca-Cola was among the first American companies to return. But the Chinese market was complex, with different regional tastes, limited infrastructure, and a tradition of tea drinking rather than soft drinks. Coca-Cola's approach to China was patient and strategic. The company invested in building bottling plants and distribution networks. It adapted its marketing to Chinese cultural sensibilities, using Chinese celebrities and cultural themes in advertising. It introduced products specifically designed for Chinese tastes. And it partnered with the Chinese government, positioning itself as a partner in China's economic development, rather than simply an American company seeking profits. The strategy worked. By the end of the 90s, China was one of Coca-Cola's fastest-growing markets. The company had become ubiquitous in Chinese cities, with Coca-Cola available in millions of retail outlets. The distinctive red logo with white script, unchanged since the 19th century, was recognized by Chinese consumers who had never heard of Atlanta or the United States. In India, Coca-Cola faced a different set of challenges. The company had operated in India since the 50s, but had been forced to leave in 1977 when the government demanded that it share its secret formula. Rather than comply, Coca-Cola withdrew from the market, a decision that left the field open to local competitors. When India's economy began opening in the early 90s, Coca-Cola returned, acquiring local brands and establishing new operations. But India was never an easy market for Coca-Cola. The company faced competition from Pepsi, which had entered the market during Coca-Cola's absence, and from local brands with deep roots and loyal customers. Coca-Cola also became a target for anti-globalization activists who saw the company as a symbol of American cultural imperialism. In some regions, Coca-Cola products were boycotted or vandalized by protesters who objected to the company's presence. Despite these challenges, Coca-Cola persisted in India, investing billions of dollars in bottling plants, distribution networks, and marketing. The company adapted its products and marketing to Indian tastes, introducing smaller package sizes for price-conscious consumers and flavors that appealed to local preferences. Africa presented yet another set of opportunities and challenges. The continent had enormous potential, with a young and growing population, but it also had limited infrastructure, political instability in many regions, and low average incomes. Coca-Cola's approach was to invest for the long term, building infrastructure where it didn't exist and adapting its business model to local economic realities. In many African countries, Coca-Cola became one of the largest private employers and investors. The company built roads to reach remote villages, created distribution networks using everything from trucks to bicycles to donkey carts, and developed packaging designed for areas without refrigeration. The investment was massive, and the returns were often modest, at least in the short term. But the company was betting on Africa's future. During this period of global expansion, Coca-Cola also solidified its position as a cultural icon, transcending its status as a mere beverage to become a symbol recognized around the world. The company's marketing emphasized universal themes: happiness, friendship, celebration, that resonated across cultural boundaries. The Always Coca-Cola campaign, launched in 1993, featured dozens of different commercials united by the tagline, showcasing Coca-Cola in diverse settings, from urban America to rural Africa. The company also leveraged sports marketing to build global brand recognition. Coca-Cola had long been associated with American sports, particularly baseball. Now it expanded into global sports, becoming a major sponsor of the Olympic Games and FIFA World Cup. These associations gave Coca-Cola presence at events watched by billions of people worldwide, reinforcing its status as a global brand. The 1990s also saw significant product innovation. Coca-Cola introduced numerous line extensions, from Cherry Coke to Vanilla Coke to various flavored versions. Diet Coke became one of the best-selling soft drinks in the world. The company expanded its non-cola portfolio, acquiring brands like Sprite, Fanta, and dozens of regional brands around the world. This product proliferation was driven partly by consumer demand for variety and partly by competitive necessity. The soft drink market was becoming increasingly fragmented, with consumers seeking different flavors, different sweetness levels, different calorie counts. A company that offered only one or two products risked losing market share to competitors offering more variety. The company's financial performance during this period was extraordinary. Under Goizueta's leadership, Coca-Cola's stock price increased more than 3,500%, creating enormous wealth for shareholders. The company was consistently ranked among the most valuable brands in the world. But success bred challenges. As Coca-Cola became more dominant globally, it became a bigger target for critics. Anti-globalization activists protested the company's presence in developing countries, arguing that it was displacing local businesses and cultures. Health advocates criticized Coca-Cola for contributing to obesity and dental problems. Environmental groups attacked the company for water usage in water-scarce regions and for creating plastic waste through disposable bottles. Roberto Goizueta died in October 1997, ending an era. Under his leadership, the Coca-Cola Company had become one of the most successful corporations in American history. His successor inherited a company at the peak of its power and influence, but also one facing new and complex challenges in a rapidly changing world. As the 20th century drew to a close, Coca-Cola stood as one of the defining symbols of that century, woven into the fabric of modern life across the entire globe. Chapter 9. Digital Age and Health Concerns, 2000 to 2010. The dawn of the 21st century brought new challenges that would test the Coca-Cola Company in ways previous decades had not. The digital revolution was transforming how consumers discovered, discussed, and purchased products. Health concerns about sugar and obesity were intensifying, threatening the core soft drink business. And the nature of competition itself was changing, with thousands of niche beverages competing for consumer attention and loyalty. The company faced immediate leadership challenges. Douglas Ivester's tenure as COO was brief and turbulent. He had succeeded Roberto Goizueta in 1997, but faced immediate challenges. A contamination scare in Belgium and France in 1999, where Coca-Cola products made dozens of people ill, damaged the company's reputation in Europe. Ivester's response was widely criticized as slow and insensitive, leading to his resignation in late 1999. His successor, Douglas Daft, took over in February 2000 with a mandate to refocus the company. Daft, an Australian who had led the company's Asian operations, believed that Coca-Cola had become too centralized and bureaucratic. He launched an initiative to make the company more responsive to local markets, pushing decision-making authority down to regional and local levels. But the Daft era was also marked by disappointments. The company's stock price stagnated. Growth slowed as the core carbonated soft drink market matured. The most significant challenge facing Coca-Cola in this decade was the growing public health concern about obesity and sugar consumption. For years, soft drinks had been considered harmless treats, occasional indulgences that were part of a normal diet. But as obesity rates in America and other developed countries soared, public health advocates began targeting sugary beverages as major contributors to the problem. The logic was compelling. A single 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola contains 39 grams of sugar, about 10 teaspoons. For someone drinking multiple sodas per day, which many Americans did, the sugar intake was enormous, and unlike solid foods, liquid calories didn't seem to trigger the same satiety response, meaning people could consume hundreds of extra calories from soft drinks without feeling full. Studies began appearing in medical journals linking soft drink consumption to obesity, type 2 diabetes, and other health problems. Public health officials called for taxes on sugary beverages, restrictions on soda size, and limits on marketing to children. Some schools banned soft drinks from vending machines. Lawsuits were filed against soft drink companies, comparing them to tobacco companies. Coca-Cola's response to these health concerns was multifaceted. The company invested heavily in expanding its portfolio of low-calorie and zero-calorie beverages. Diet Coke remained successful, but the company also introduced Coca-Cola Zero in 2005, a zero-calorie cola marketed primarily to young men who perceived Diet Coke as a drink for women. The company expanded its non-carbonated portfolio acquiring brands like Vitamin Water and expanding its juice and sports drink offerings. The company also worked to position itself as part of the solution to obesity rather than part of the problem. It provided calorie information on packaging, supported physical activity programs, and emphasized that its products could be part of a balanced diet when consumed in moderation. The message was that Coca-Cola wasn't inherently bad. Overconsumption was the problem, and that was a matter of personal responsibility. But critics were unpersuaded. They pointed to the company's massive marketing budget, its ubiquitous distribution, and its historical targeting of children and teenagers. They argued that Coca-Cola had spent decades engineering products and marketing campaigns designed to encourage consumption, and that it was disingenuous to now claim that consumption levels were solely a matter of individual choice. The digital revolution transformed how Coca-Cola marketed its products. Traditional advertising channels, television, radio, print, billboards remained important, but digital media offered new opportunities for targeted, interactive marketing. The company established a presence on emerging social media platforms, created viral video campaigns, and experimented with digital advertising. But the digital age also empowered critics. Websites and social media made it easy for activists to organize boycotts, spread negative information, and pressure the company. A single incident, a labor dispute at a bottling plant, a contamination issue, an environmental problem, could quickly become a global controversy magnified by digital communication and damaging the brand in ways that would have been impossible in earlier decades. In 2008, the company appointed Mukhtar Kent as CEO. Kent, who had previously led the company's international operations, brought a focus on international growth and product innovation. He recognized that the future of the company lay not just in selling more Coca-Cola, but in becoming a total beverage company, offering products for every occasion and preference. Under Kent's leadership, the company accelerated its acquisition of non-carbonated beverage brands. It purchased energy drink companies, tea brands, coconut water makers, and dozens of other businesses. The goal was to have a presence in every growing beverage category, so that even as traditional soda sales declined, the company could maintain revenue growth through other products. This period also saw increased focus on emerging markets, particularly in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. While soda consumption was declining in North America and Europe, it was still growing in developing countries where rising incomes made soft drinks more accessible. The company invested billions in these markets, building infrastructure and adapting products to local tastes. In China, Coca-Cola made a particularly aggressive push. The company introduced products specifically for the Chinese market, from teas to juices to dairy drinks. It expanded its distribution network to reach even remote rural areas, and it positioned itself as a partner in China's development, emphasizing job creation and economic contribution. The company also grappled with sustainability concerns during this decade. Environmental activists criticized Coca-Cola for water usage in water-scarce regions, for plastic bottle waste, and for carbon emissions from manufacturing and distribution. The company responded with ambitious sustainability initiatives, committing to return all water used in beverages to communities and nature, to recycle or reuse all packaging, and to reduce carbon emissions. Whether these commitments were genuine attempts to address legitimate concerns or primarily public relations exercises designed to deflect criticism, is debatable. The company made real investments in sustainability, funding water conservation projects and developing more recyclable packaging. But critics argued that these efforts were insufficient given the scale of the company's environmental impact. As the decade drew to a close, Coca-Cola remained one of the world's most valuable and recognized brands. But it was also a company under pressure from multiple directions. Health concerns threatened its core business. Environmental and labor criticisms challenged its social license to operate. Digital disruption changed how it connected with consumers, and an increasingly fragmented beverage market made it harder to maintain dominance through a single flagship product. The company's response, diversification, international growth, sustainability initiatives, and product innovation addressed some of these challenges. But fundamental questions remained about the future of a company built on selling sweetened beverages in an increasingly health-conscious world. Chapter 10. Modern Transformation, 2011 to 2020. The second decade of the 21st century demanded that the Coca-Cola Company reinvent itself while maintaining its core identity, a paradoxical challenge that defined this era. The company had to acknowledge that the world was changing in fundamental ways while insisting that Coca-Cola remained relevant and valuable. Under Muhtar Kent's continued leadership, the company pursued what it called the 2020 Vision, a strategy aimed at doubling system revenues by the year 2020. This ambitious goal required growth across multiple dimensions, expanding in emerging markets, increasing per capita consumption in existing markets, capturing a larger share of the total beverage market through new products, and improving profitability through operational efficiency. The acquisition strategy accelerated dramatically. The company purchased stakes in or acquired outright dozens of brands: energy drinks, coconut water, premium juices, organic teas, sports drinks, and more. The goal was to have a product for every consumer preference, every occasion, every price point. If consumers wanted something other than traditional soda, Coca-Cola would offer it to them. Some acquisitions proved successful. The expansion of the Smart Water line captured the premium water market. The development of Coca-Cola Life, a lower-calorie soda sweetened partly with stevia, showed the company's willingness to experiment with alternative sweeteners. But not all innovations succeeded. Numerous regional products launched and quietly disappeared. The health and wellness trend continued to pressure the core business. Soda consumption in the United States and Europe continued its long decline, as consumers increasingly viewed sugary drinks as unhealthy indulgences rather than everyday refreshments. The company responded with a three-pronged approach, offering more low-calorie and zero-calorie options, reducing sugar content in existing products, and advocating for physical activity and balanced diets as solutions to obesity. The reduced sugar strategy proved particularly challenging. Reducing sugar in soft drinks changes their taste, potentially alienating consumers who drink them precisely because they like the sweet taste. The company experimented with smaller package sizes, arguing that a 7.5-ounce can of regular Coca-Cola had fewer calories than larger portions and could fit into a balanced diet. Digital marketing became increasingly sophisticated during this period. The company launched campaigns that went viral, creating content designed to be shared on social media. The Share a Coke campaign, which began in Australia in 2011 and spread globally, replaced the Coca-Cola logo on bottles with popular names, encouraging people to buy bottles with their own names or names of friends and family. The campaign was hugely successful, generating millions of social media interactions and increasing sales. It demonstrated the power of personalization, even for a mass-market product. People posted pictures of their personalized Coke bottles, created video content around the campaign, and engaged with the brand in ways that traditional advertising never achieved. But digital media also amplified controversies. Every campaign, every statement, every action was immediately dissected and debated online, often in harsh and unforgiving terms. The company faced criticism on multiple fronts simultaneously, requiring constant attention to reputation management. Sustainability initiatives expanded during this period, driven partly by genuine commitment and partly by recognition that environmental credentials were increasingly important to consumers and investors. The company committed to making all packaging recyclable by 2025, to using at least 50% recycled content in bottles, and to collecting and recycling the equivalent of all bottles and cans it sold. These commitments were ambitious, perhaps overly so. Actually achieving them would require massive investment and cooperation from partners and governments around the world. Critics questioned whether the company was really committed to solving the plastic waste problem, or simply trying to avoid more stringent regulation. In 2017, James Quincey succeeded Muhtar Kent as CEO. Quincey, a British executive who had been with the company since 1996, inherited a company that was still enormously successful by most measures, but facing fundamental challenges to its business model. Carbonated soft drink sales were declining in key markets. Health concerns were intensifying. Environmental criticism was mounting. Quincey's response was to accelerate the transformation already underway. The company would become a total beverage company, competing in every beverage category. It would streamline its product portfolio, discontinuing underperforming brands and focusing resources on winners. It would reduce its dependency on bottling operations, selling company-owned bottlers to independent operators. And it would double down on marketing, brand building, and innovation. As the decade approached its end, the company faced an unexpected crisis that would test all of its recent adaptations. In late 2019, reports emerged from China about a new coronavirus. By early 2020, COVID-19 had become a global pandemic, shutting down much of the world economy and fundamentally altering consumer behavior. When COVID-19 emerged, its impact on Coca-Cola was devastating. The company derived a significant portion of its revenue from away-from-home consumption: restaurants, bars, stadiums, movie theaters, theme parks, and other venues where people gathered. As governments imposed lockdowns and consumers stayed home to avoid infection, these venues closed or saw traffic plummet. Coca-Cola's sales in these channels collapsed almost overnight. The company adapted quickly to changed circumstances. It shifted marketing from focusing on social gatherings and celebrations to messages of resilience, perseverance, and looking forward to better times. It emphasized safety, promoting hygiene standards and contactless delivery options, and it accelerated the development of e-commerce capabilities, recognizing that consumers were increasingly purchasing beverages online for home delivery. The crisis also accelerated some trends that had been developing pre-pandemic. The health and wellness focus intensified as people became more conscious of their physical well-being. Demand for low-sugar and zero-sugar products increased. interest in functional beverages grew. The pandemic forced difficult decisions. The company announced in July 2020 that it would discontinue about half of its approximately 400 brands, focusing on 20 category leaders that represented the vast majority of its revenue. Brands that had survived for decades were summarily eliminated. Tab, the diet cola that had once been significant, was discontinued after 57 years. Odwalla juice, Zico coconut water, and numerous regional and niche products were cut. These decisions were painful, but reflected brutal pragmatism. The pandemic had clarified what mattered to the business and what didn't. Products that required separate production runs, complex distribution, and specialized marketing were luxuries the company couldn't afford. Better to focus resources on products that generated significant revenue and profit. As 2020 drew to a close, the pandemic continued with no clear end in sight. Vaccines were being developed and distributed, offering hope that normalcy would eventually return. But when that would happen and what normal would look like was uncertain. For the Coca-Cola Company, the pandemic had been both crisis and catalyst. It had exposed vulnerabilities in the business model, but also forced changes that might have taken years to implement otherwise. Portfolio rationalization, digital acceleration, supply chain adaptation. The company had survived previous crises and would survive this one too. But the question wasn't just survival, it was relevance in a world transformed by pandemic, changing consumer preferences, environmental concerns, and health consciousness. Chapter 11, Present Day and Future, 2021 to 2025. As vaccines rolled out and the acute phase of the pandemic waned in 2021, the Coca-Cola Company found itself navigating a world fundamentally altered. Consumer behaviors had shifted, some temporarily, some perhaps permanently. The company's challenge was understanding which changes were durable and which would fade as normalcy returned. One immediate question was the return of away-from-home consumption. As restaurants reopened, as sports fans returned to stadiums, would Coca-Cola's business in these channels recover to pre-pandemic levels? The answer was complicated. Recovery was uneven across regions. Business travel, a significant source of beverage sales, remained well below pre-pandemic levels. Some consumers had developed new habits that persisted even after restrictions lifted. The company's streamlined portfolio showed benefits. With fewer brands to manage, the company could focus marketing and innovation resources on products with the greatest potential. The category leaders' strategy allowed for more consistent messaging and more efficient operations. But it also meant less ability to serve niche tastes, potentially opening opportunities for smaller competitors. James Quincy continued to push for transformation. In 2021, he articulated a vision of Coca-Cola as a networked organization, less hierarchical and more collaborative than traditional corporate structures. The idea was to make the company more agile, more able to respond quickly to changing market conditions and emerging trends. Sustainability remained a major focus and challenge. The company's commitments to recycling and reducing plastic waste required cooperation from retailers, consumers, and governments. But progress was slow. Recycling infrastructure in many countries remained inadequate. Consumers often didn't recycle bottles, even when infrastructure existed. The company experimented with various solutions: bottle designs, using less plastic, increased use of recycled content, investments in recycling infrastructure, support for bottle deposit schemes. But critics argued that these efforts didn't address the fundamental issue. The company was producing billions of single-use plastic bottles annually. In 2022, the company faced a new crisis, different from the pandemic, but potentially as consequential: Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Coca-Cola had operated in Russia since the collapse of the Soviet Union, building significant business. The company also had operations in Ukraine. The war put the company in an impossible position. The company's response was gradual. It suspended new investments in Russia and stopped advertising, but didn't immediately withdraw entirely. Pressure from Ukrainian activists, American politicians, and consumers organizing boycotts eventually led the company to suspend operations in Russia. The episode highlighted the challenges of being a global company in an increasingly fragmented geopolitical environment. Environmental, social, and governance concerns became increasingly important to investors. Asset managers and pension funds pressed the company to demonstrate progress on sustainability goals, diversity initiatives, and responsible business practices. The company responded with detailed reports, targets, and commitments, but measuring and verifying progress on these issues proved challenging. The obesity and health debate continued to evolve. The scientific consensus linking sugary beverage consumption to obesity and other health problems had strengthened. More jurisdictions implemented taxes on sugary drinks. Some countries mandated warning labels. Consumer attitudes, particularly among younger people, increasingly viewed regular soda as unhealthy. The company's response continued to emphasize choice and moderation. It expanded its portfolio of zero-sugar options, with Coca-Cola Zero Sugar becoming an increasingly important product. It introduced smaller package sizes for regular Coke, and it emphasized that obesity was a complex issue with many contributing factors. Technology became increasingly important to the business. The company invested in artificial intelligence and machine learning to optimize everything from flavor development to supply chain management to marketing. It used data analytics to identify emerging trends and predict consumer preferences. It experimented with direct-to-consumer sales models, bypassing traditional retail channels. In 2023, the company celebrated significant milestones. Coca-Cola Zero Sugar surpassed Diet Coke to become the company's second best-selling product globally, marking a generational shift. The company's stock price recovered from pandemic lows. Surveys continued to show Coca-Cola as one of the most recognized and valuable brands in the world. But challenges persisted. Soda consumption in developed markets continued its long-term decline. Competition from energy drinks, functional beverages, and premium waters intensified. And younger consumers, the key to future growth, were the least loyal to traditional cola brands. The company's strategy for addressing these challenges combined continuity and change. It would maintain and protect the core Coca-Cola brand, which remained enormously valuable despite challenges. It would continue diversifying into other beverage categories. It would invest in sustainability, and it would embrace technological transformation. Looking toward the future, several scenarios seem plausible. In one, Coca-Cola successfully navigates the health and environmental challenges, maintaining its position through product innovation and adaptation, while the core brand remains strong. In another, the company experiences slow decline in developed markets, compensated by growth in developing markets and new product categories. In a third, regulatory and social pressure creates an inflection point where the business model must fundamentally change. What seems unlikely is stasis. The company cannot simply continue doing what it has done. and expect similar results. The world has changed too much. Consumer preferences have evolved too far. The scrutiny has become too intense. Coca-Cola must continue evolving, adapting, transforming. The people who work at Coca-Cola today are custodians of something larger than a business. They're maintaining and evolving a cultural institution, a brand that has meaning far beyond its commercial value. This is both a privilege and a burden, creating pressure to honor the past while building the future. For consumers around the world, Coca-Cola likely will remain a familiar presence, though perhaps in different forms and contexts than in the past. The distinctive script logo will still appear on vending machines and store shelves. The taste, or something close to it, will still be available. But the role Coca-Cola plays in people's lives may continue to shift, from everyday staple to occasional indulgence, from unremarkable presence to conscious choice. Chapter 12. The Secret Formula and Brand Mystique. Behind all of Coca-Cola's marketing, all its business strategies, all its global expansion, lies something both simple and mysterious: the formula. The exact recipe for Coca-Cola has been one of the most closely guarded trade secrets in business history, protected with a level of security that seems almost absurd for a beverage recipe. Yet this secrecy itself has become part of the brand's mystique, adding to Coca-Cola's allure and value. The original formula, developed by John Pemberton in 1886, has been modified over the years, most notably when cocaine was removed in the early 20th century. The basic ingredients are known: carbonated water, high fructose corn syrup or sugar depending on the market, caramel color, phosphoric acid, natural flavors, and caffeine. It's those natural flavors where the secret lies, particularly an ingredient known as Merchandise 7X, a mixture of oils from various plants. According to legend, the complete formula is known to only 2 company executives at any time, and they're not allowed to travel together in case an accident should kill them both and leave the company without anyone who knows how to make Coca-Cola. The formula is supposedly stored in a vault at the World of Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta. These stories are part mythology, part marketing, part truth. The formula is indeed closely guarded, but surely more than 2 people know it. Otherwise, quality control and production would be impossible. The secrecy serves multiple purposes. It prevents competitors from exactly duplicating Coca-Cola's taste, though that protection is probably more psychological than practical. Modern food science could likely reverse engineer the formula if anyone cared enough to do so. More importantly, the secrecy creates mystique. The idea that there's something special and irreproducible about Coca-Cola adds to the brand's value and differentiation. Beyond the formula, Coca-Cola has achieved something remarkable. It has transcended being merely a product to become a cultural symbol. The distinctive script logo, the contour bottle shape, the bright red color scheme. These have become visual shorthand for American consumer culture itself. Andy Warhol captured this in his iconic Coca-Cola paintings, which portrayed the bottle as pop art, as an object worthy of artistic attention. Coca-Cola has been present at countless important moments in history. It was there as America emerged from World War II, as suburbs expanded, as consumer culture blossomed. It was part of the American presence in occupied Germany and Japan. It was served at the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was consumed by astronauts in space, by climbers on Mount Everest, by explorers in Antarctica. This ubiquity has made Coca-Cola a target for those critical of American consumer culture or globalization. To anti-American protesters around the world, Smashing Coca-Cola bottles has been a way of expressing opposition to American power. To anti-globalization activists, Coca-Cola represents corporate capitalism's penetration into every corner of the globe. But for billions of people, Coca-Cola has simpler associations: refreshment, pleasure, a small indulgence, a taste of childhood. The company's advertising has consistently portrayed Coca-Cola not as a mere beverage, but as part of life's happy moments. The famous Hilltop ad from 1971, featuring young people of diverse nationalities singing "I'd like to buy the world a Coke," expressed an idealistic vision of Coca-Cola as bringing people together across boundaries. This aspirational messaging has been remarkably consistent across decades. Whether it's the 1950s imagery of wholesome American families or the diverse global imagery of recent campaigns, the message has been that Coca-Cola is associated with happiness, connection, and positive experiences. Coca-Cola has also become embedded in Christmas traditions, thanks largely to the company's own marketing. The modern image of Santa Claus, a jolly red-suited figure with white trim, was popularized by Coca-Cola advertising in the 1930s. The association between Coca-Cola and Christmas has been so successful that in many countries, the arrival of Coca-Cola's Christmas trucks, featured in advertising, has become a beloved seasonal tradition. The company has also shaped language and culture in subtle ways. The term Coke has become, in many places, a generic term for cola, or even for soft drinks generally. Phrases like "the pause that refreshes" and "the real thing" have entered popular language, their origins in Coca-Cola advertising long forgotten by many who use them. In literature, film, and television, Coca-Cola has been both product placement and cultural signifier. Its presence in a scene can communicate something about setting, character, or theme. The bottle itself has become an iconic object, recognizable even in silhouette. It has been collected, displayed as art, used as a vase or decorative object. Coca-Cola has also played a role in spreading American English and American culture globally. In many countries, learning English has meant encountering Coca-Cola advertising and branding. The script logo, in English, has appeared on signs in countries where few people speak English, becoming one of the most widely recognized pieces of English text on the planet. The company's influence on advertising and marketing practices has been profound. Many techniques now standard in marketing were pioneered or perfected by Coca-Cola. Business schools study Coca-Cola's marketing as examples of effective brand management. Perhaps Coca-Cola's most significant cultural impact has been in establishing what a global brand can be. It showed that a brand could adapt to local markets while remaining fundamentally the same. And it proved that a simple product could become valuable not just for what it was, but for what it represented. Chapter 13. Cultural Impact and Criticism. As Coca-Cola became a global phenomenon in the 20th century, it evolved from being simply a beverage company into something more complex and controversial, a symbol of American capitalism, globalization, and consumer culture itself. This transformation brought both enormous success and significant criticism, making Coca-Cola one of the most discussed and debated brands in the world. The company's cultural impact is undeniable. In many countries, Coca-Cola was among the first American products to arrive, introducing populations to American-style consumer marketing and brand consciousness. The distinctive logo became a visual marker of modernization and Western influence. For better or worse, seeing a Coca-Cola sign often meant you had reached civilization connectivity, the modern world. This cultural penetration was deliberate. Coca-Cola's international expansion wasn't just about selling beverages. It was about establishing American presence, American values, American ways of doing business. During the Cold War, Coca-Cola was explicitly positioned as representing capitalism and freedom, in contrast to communist austerity. The company worked closely with the U.S. government on various initiatives, and its global expansion was sometimes seen as going hand in hand with American political and economic influence. Critics have long argued that Coca-Cola represents cultural imperialism, the replacement of local cultures, traditions, and products with American alternatives. In many countries, the arrival of Coca-Cola coincided with the decline of traditional beverages and local soft drink companies. Small businesses couldn't compete with Coca-Cola's massive marketing budgets, sophisticated distribution networks, and economies of scale. The result, critics argue, has been cultural homogenization, with local uniqueness giving way to global standardization. The health criticism of Coca-Cola has intensified over the past few decades. Public health advocates argue that the company has contributed significantly to the global obesity epidemic by aggressively marketing sugar-sweetened beverages, particularly to children. They point to the company's historical resistance to regulation, its funding of research that downplays sugar's health impacts, and its efforts to shift blame for obesity from product to consumer behavior. The scientific evidence linking sugary beverage consumption to obesity, diabetes, and other health problems has become overwhelming. Studies have shown that people who regularly consume sugary drinks have significantly higher risks of weight gain and chronic diseases. In response, numerous jurisdictions have implemented taxes on sugary beverages, with evidence suggesting these taxes reduce consumption and improve health outcomes. Coca-Cola has argued that its products can be part of a healthy diet when consumed in moderation, that personal responsibility matters more than specific products, and that obesity is a complex problem with many causes. The company has pointed to its expanded portfolio of low-calorie and zero-calorie options, its support for physical activity programs, and its provision of calorie information on packaging. Environmental criticism has also intensified. Coca-Cola is one of the world's largest producers of plastic waste, manufacturing billions of single-use plastic bottles annually. Environmental advocates argue that this plastic pollution is devastating to ecosystems, particularly oceans, where plastic accumulates and harms marine life. They also criticize the company's water usage in water-scarce regions, arguing that Coca-Cola sometimes depletes local water resources to produce beverages. The company has responded with sustainability commitments, including goals to make all packaging recyclable, to use recycled content in packaging, and to replenish water used in beverages. But critics argue these commitments are insufficient and question whether recycling can ever be an adequate solution to the scale of plastic production involved. Labor practices at Coca-Cola facilities and among its bottlers have also drawn criticism. In several countries, particularly in Latin America, Coca-Cola bottling plants have faced accusations of union busting, poor working conditions, and even violence against labor organizers. While the company argues that many of these issues involve independent bottlers rather than Coca-Cola itself, critics counter that the company bears responsibility for the entire system that produces and distributes its products. In Colombia, specifically, union leaders at Coca-Cola bottling plants have been murdered, And while the company has denied involvement, the controversies have damaged its reputation and led to boycotts and protests. The company has worked with independent organizations to address labor concerns, but activists argue that more fundamental changes are needed. Marketing to children has been another source of criticism. Health advocates argue that Coca-Cola has historically targeted children and adolescents with advertising, creating brand loyalty and consumption habits at young ages. They point to the company's presence in schools through vending machines and sponsorships, its use of cartoon characters and celebrities popular with children, and its creation of branded merchandise and experiences aimed at young people. In response to this criticism, Coca-Cola has implemented policies limiting advertising directed at children, has removed products from some schools, and has supported nutrition education programs. But critics argue these voluntary measures are insufficient and that stronger regulation is needed to protect children from sophisticated marketing techniques. Despite all these criticisms, Coca-Cola remains enormously successful and popular. Billions of people drink Coca-Cola products regularly, and surveys consistently show it as one of the world's most beloved brands. This creates a paradox. Coca-Cola is simultaneously criticized as a symbol of unhealthy consumer culture and celebrated as an iconic brand that brings pleasure to billions. Part of Coca-Cola's enduring appeal may be precisely its simplicity and consistency. In a rapidly changing world, Coca-Cola represents something familiar and constant. It tastes the same whether consumed in New York or Tokyo or Nairobi. It connects people to shared experiences and memories. And for many, it's simply a beverage they enjoy, regardless of larger debates about health, environment, or culture. The company's future will likely depend on how it navigates these competing pressures. It must maintain the core brand that has made it successful while adapting to changing consumer preferences and social expectations. It must acknowledge legitimate concerns about health and environment while defending its right to produce and market legal products. And it must balance global standardization with local adaptation, maintaining brand consistency while respecting cultural diversity. Chapter 14. Business Model and Economics. To truly understand the Coca-Cola Company, one must understand its unique business model, which has been crucial to its success and global expansion. Unlike many manufacturing companies, Coca-Cola doesn't actually produce most of the beverages sold under its brands. Instead, it operates primarily as a marketing and concentrate production company, with the actual bottling and distribution handled by a network of independent and company-owned bottlers. Here's how it works. The Coca-Cola Company produces concentrated syrup at a relatively small number of facilities around the world. This concentrate contains the secret formula and all the essential flavoring ingredients. The company then sells this concentrate to bottlers, who add carbonated water and sweeteners, package the resulting beverage in bottles or cans, and distribute it to retailers, restaurants, and vending machines in their designated territories. This franchise system has been fundamental to Coca-Cola's success for over a century. It allowed the company to expand rapidly without massive capital investment in bottling plants and distribution infrastructure. The bottlers take on the capital-intensive aspects of the business, building plants, buying equipment, operating trucks, hiring distribution workers, while Coca-Cola focuses on brand development, marketing, and protecting the formula. For Coca-Cola, this model is highly profitable. The cost of producing concentrate is relatively low, while the selling price to bottlers provides strong margins. The company invests heavily in marketing and brand support, but these investments benefit from enormous economies of scale when spread across global sales of billions of servings per day. The bottlers, meanwhile, earn their profits from the difference between what they pay for concentrate and what they receive for selling finished beverages, minus their costs of production, distribution, and marketing. Successful bottlers can be highly profitable businesses, particularly those with efficient operations and favorable territories. However, this franchise system has also created tensions and complications over the years. Bottlers are independent businesses with their own shareholders, management, and strategic priorities. They don't always agree with the company's strategies or priorities, and because they invest heavily in territory-specific infrastructure, they're deeply concerned about any changes that might affect their profitability. One recurring source of tension is pricing. The company wants to maintain brand strength and market share, which sometimes means aggressive pricing or promotional spending. Bottlers want to maximize profitability, which means higher prices and lower promotional costs. Balancing these competing interests requires ongoing negotiation and occasional confrontation. Another source of tension is product portfolio. When Coca-Cola wants to introduce new products, bottlers must invest in new equipment, create space in distribution systems, and allocate marketing resources. If a new product fails, the bottlers bear much of the financial pain. This makes bottlers naturally conservative about product innovation, sometimes frustrating the company's efforts to adapt to changing consumer preferences. Over the decades, Coca-Cola has worked to consolidate and professionalize its bottler network. Many bottling territories that were once held by small, family-owned businesses have been merged into larger regional or national operations. The company has at times purchased bottlers outright, bringing them under corporate control, and at other times has sold company-owned bottlers to independent operators or large bottling groups. The current trend has been toward an asset-light model, where Coca-Cola focuses on its core competencies of brand development and concentrate production while leaving capital-intensive bottling and distribution to partners. This strategy improves return on invested capital and allows the company to focus resources on areas where it has the strongest competitive advantages. The economics of the soft drink business are fundamentally about volume and efficiency. The ingredients in a bottle of Coca-Cola, water, sugar, or high-fructose corn syrup, caramel coloring, flavoring, caffeine, carbonation, are remarkably inexpensive. The value comes from the brand, the distribution system, and the consistent quality and taste that consumers expect. This means that for Coca-Cola to be profitable, it must sell enormous volumes and operate with high efficiency. The company's extensive marketing investments are designed to drive volume by keeping the brand top of mind for consumers and creating positive associations. The company's focus on distribution aims to make Coca-Cola available wherever consumers might want it, maximizing purchase opportunities. The financial performance of the Coca-Cola Company has been impressive over its history. The company has generated substantial returns for shareholders over the long term, with the stock price appreciating dramatically, especially during the Goizueta era of the 1980s and 90s. Dividends have been consistently paid and regularly increased, making Coca-Cola a favorite of income-focused investors. However, the company has faced challenges maintaining growth in recent decades. The core carbonated soft drink market in developed countries has been stagnant or declining. This has put pressure on the company to find growth elsewhere, in emerging markets, in non-carbonated beverages, in premium products, in new consumption occasions. The company's valuation has historically reflected its strong brand, global presence, and ability to generate cash. At various times, Coca-Cola has been valued at a substantial premium to the market average, reflecting investor confidence in its competitive position and growth prospects. However, concerns about long-term health trends and market saturation have sometimes pressured the valuation. One interesting aspect of Coca-Cola's business model is its relatively low capital intensity compared to many global corporations. Because much of the capital investment is made by bottlers rather than the company itself, Coca-Cola can generate substantial cash flow without massive ongoing capital expenditures. This cash has historically been returned to shareholders through dividends and share buybacks, though the company also invests in marketing innovation and strategic acquisitions. The company's global footprint creates both opportunities and challenges. It benefits from geographic diversification, with performance in different regions offsetting each other to some degree. It can leverage global scale in areas like marketing development and ingredient purchasing. But it also faces complexity in managing operations across diverse regulatory, economic, and cultural environments. Currency fluctuations are a constant challenge for a company operating in nearly every country. When the dollar strengthens, international earnings translate into fewer dollars, hurting reported results. The company uses various hedging strategies to manage currency risk, but it can never fully eliminate the impact of exchange rate movements on a business this global. Looking forward, the economics of the soft drink business may continue to evolve. Changing consumer preferences may require more investment in product innovation and reformulation. Sustainability pressures may increase costs related to packaging and water usage. Regulatory changes like sugar taxes may affect profitability and require adaptation, and competition from niche brands and private label products may pressure pricing and share. How Coca-Cola adapts its business model to these pressures while maintaining profitability will be crucial to its continued success. Chapter 15. Legacy and Future Horizons. As we approach a century and a half since John Pemberton first stirred his experimental syrup in Atlanta, the Coca-Cola Company stands at a crossroads between an extraordinary past and an uncertain future. The journey from a backyard experiment to a global cultural phenomenon has been remarkable, filled with innovation, adaptation, controversy, and success. The numbers tell one story. Coca-Cola products are consumed more than 19 billion times per day globally. The company operates in more than 200 countries and territories. The brand value is estimated at nearly $100 billion. These are extraordinary achievements for any business, let alone one based on selling a sweetened beverage. But the challenges tell another story. In North America and Europe, per capita, soft drink consumption has been declining for years. The health concerns that drive this decline show no signs of abating. Environmental pressures regarding plastic waste and water usage are mounting, and younger consumers have different preferences and values than previous generations. The company's response has been to transform itself from a soft drink company into a total beverage company. This transformation is well underway, but far from complete. The company now offers hundreds of beverage options, from zero-calorie colas to premium waters, to energy drinks, to coffees. The goal is to have a product appropriate for any consumer preference, any occasion, any moment. But this diversification raises fundamental questions about brand identity. For more than a century, the Coca-Cola Company was essentially synonymous with Coca-Cola, the flagship product. That product's taste, formula, and image defined the company. As the company becomes more diverse, what is its core identity? What holds the portfolio together beyond corporate ownership? The company's answer seems to be that it's in the business of providing moments of refreshment and pleasure, regardless of the specific beverage. This is a broader mission than simply selling Coca-Cola, and it allows for the kind of portfolio diversity the company is pursuing. But it also means that the Coca-Cola brand, while still central, is no longer the entire story. The international dimension of Coca-Cola's future is crucial. While developed markets are mature or declining, emerging markets in Asia, Africa, and Latin America still offer growth potential. Rising incomes in these regions mean more people can afford branded beverages. The company is investing heavily in these markets, building infrastructure, developing local products, and adapting marketing to local cultures. But international expansion brings challenges beyond business strategy. Coca-Cola operates in countries with authoritarian governments, poor human rights records, and complex political situations. The company must navigate these environments carefully, balancing business interests with ethical responsibilities. The technology transformation happening within the company represents another dimension of its evolution. Coca-Cola is investing in artificial intelligence, blockchain for supply chain management, advanced analytics, and direct-to-consumer digital platforms. These technologies promise to make the company more efficient, more responsive, and better able to understand and serve consumers. The sustainability challenge looms large over Coca-Cola's future. The company has made ambitious commitments to reduce its environmental footprint. Meeting these commitments will require innovation, investment, and cooperation from partners and governments. But even if the company succeeds, it will still face criticism from those who believe that a company built on selling billions of plastic bottles is inherently unsustainable. Some envision a future where Coca-Cola moves away from single-use packaging entirely, perhaps toward refillable bottles, fountain-style dispensers in homes, or other reusable delivery systems. The technology for such systems exists, but implementing such a radical change would require rethinking the entire business model. The health debate will continue to shape Coca-Cola's future. The scientific evidence linking sugary beverage consumption to obesity and related health problems is strong and growing stronger. Regulatory pressure is likely to increase. Consumer attitudes, particularly among health-conscious younger people, are shifting away from sugary drinks. The company can respond by continuing to expand its portfolio of low-calorie and zero-calorie products, by reducing sugar in existing products, and by positioning its products as occasional treats. But there's a limit to how far this strategy can go. At some point, a company that makes most of its money from selling sugar water has to confront the possibility that demand for that product may structurally decline in important markets. One possible future sees Coca-Cola becoming primarily a developing world company. As developed markets continue to turn away from sugary drinks, the company might focus increasingly on markets where such concerns are less pressing and growth potential is greater. This would represent a profound shift from an American company that expanded globally to a truly global company that happens to be headquartered in America. Another possibility is that Coca-Cola successfully transforms into a beverage company where the flagship product is important but not dominant. where a diverse portfolio generates growth even as traditional soda sales decline. This transformation is what the company's current strategy envisions, and it's well underway. The question is whether the company can execute this transformation while maintaining the brand's strength and corporate culture that made it successful. The role of artificial intelligence and personalization in Coca-Cola's future is intriguing. Imagine a future where AI analyzes your preferences, health data, and context to recommend or even create customized beverages. Coca-Cola has the resources and data to move in this direction, creating personalized products rather than mass-market ones. Coca-Cola's cultural significance will likely persist even as the business evolves. The brand has achieved something rare. It has become part of the collective memory and experience of multiple generations across many cultures. Even people who don't drink Coca-Cola recognize and have opinions about it. That cultural capital is enormously valuable. The people who work at Coca-Cola today are custodians of something larger than a business. They're maintaining and evolving a cultural institution, a brand that has meaning far beyond its commercial value. This is both a privilege and a burden. For consumers around the world, Coca-Cola likely will remain a familiar presence, though perhaps in different forms and contexts. The distinctive script logo will still appear. The taste will still be available to those who want it. But the role Coca-Cola plays in people's lives may continue to shift. The story of Coca-Cola is, in many ways, the story of American capitalism itself. Innovation, aggressive marketing, global expansion, adaptation to changing circumstances, and the tension between commercial success and social responsibility. As America's role in the world continues to evolve, as globalization enters new phases, as consumer culture faces new challenges, Coca-Cola's story will reflect these larger changes. John Pemberton, stirring his experimental syrup in a backyard in Atlanta in 1886, could never have imagined what his creation would become. He was simply trying to make a living, to create a product people would buy. That his formula became the foundation for a global empire, a cultural icon, a symbol recognized around the world, would have been beyond his wildest dreams. Each generation of Coca-Cola leadership has navigated challenges their predecessors never imagined. Each has honored the past while adapting to the present and preparing for the future. The next generation will face challenges we can anticipate and others we cannot yet see. But if Coca-Cola's history teaches anything, it's that the company has survived and adapted through world wars, economic depressions, cultural revolutions, and technological transformations. The real secret of Coca-Cola's success isn't a list of ingredients. It's the ability to adapt while maintaining identity, to change while preserving essence, to be both constant and evolving. As the sun sets on another day, somewhere in the world, millions of people are opening bottles or cans bearing the distinctive script logo. Each of these consumption occasions represents a small connection between the consumer and the company, between the individual and a global enterprise, between the present moment and more than a century of history. The future will bring changes we can anticipate and others we cannot. Coca-Cola will adapt, as it always has, or it will decline, as many once dominant companies have. But whatever happens, the story of Coca-Cola from 1886 to today will remain a remarkable chapter in the history of American business, consumer culture, and globalization. Epilogue. Reflections on an Icon. As we close this extensive exploration of Coca-Cola's journey, it's worth pausing to reflect on what this story reveals about business, culture, and society over the past century and a half. Coca-Cola's rise demonstrates the power of branding in ways few other examples can match. The company didn't succeed simply because it had a superior product. It succeeded because it built a brand that transcended the physical product, creating emotional connections and cultural associations that gave Coca-Cola meaning beyond mere refreshment. The story also illustrates how businesses must constantly adapt to survive. Every era of Coca-Cola's history required different strategies, different approaches, different ways of thinking about the product and the market. The company that succeeded in the early 20th century by positioning Coca-Cola as a medicinal tonic had to reinvent itself as a pure refreshment drink. The company that dominated mid-century America through ubiquitous distribution and cheerful advertising had to learn to compete globally. The controversies that have followed Coca-Cola throughout its history remind us that commercial success doesn't exist in isolation from social responsibility. Every business decision has consequences beyond profits and losses. Every product affects not just those who consume it, but the broader society and environment. The global spread of Coca-Cola represents both the promise and the peril of globalization. Globalization can spread prosperity, create jobs, and give people access to products and experiences they value. But it can also homogenize cultures, concentrate economic power, and create dependencies on distant corporations. Perhaps most fundamentally, Coca-Cola's story demonstrates how deeply commercial products can become embedded in culture and identity. For generations of people around the world, Coca-Cola has been more than just a beverage. It's been a taste of childhood, a connection to America, a symbol of prosperity, a familiar comfort in unfamiliar places. As we move further into the 21st century, the lessons from Coca-Cola's history remain relevant. They remind us that success is never permanent, that adaptation is essential, that brands and businesses exist within larger social and cultural contexts that they can influence but never fully control. The story of Coca-Cola is still being written. New chapters will emerge, new challenges will arise, new adaptations will be required. But the journey from that backyard in Atlanta to every corner of the globe will remain one of the most remarkable stories in business history. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the complete history of Coca-Cola. From a 5-cent fountain drink to a global icon worth billions, from a patent medicine to a cultural symbol, from a single pharmacist's experiment to a company employing hundreds of thousands worldwide. This is the story of how a simple idea became extraordinary, how a local product became global, and how a beverage became something more than what it contained. The red disc with white script will continue to appear in cities and towns across the world. The distinctive taste will remain available to those who seek it, and the story will continue to evolve, reflecting the changes in our world, our values, and our relationship with the companies and brands that have become part of our collective experience. May this history provide not just information, but insight into how businesses evolve, how brands are built, and how a simple beverage can become a cultural phenomenon recognized around the entire world. The complete history of Coca-Cola is, in many ways, a history of modern consumer culture itself, with all its triumphs, complexities, and contradictions.